Bookopoly is back, baby, but in a slightly different way than you've ever seen her before. So today I am going to be recommending you books based on prompts generated by ye old Bookopoly board. This is not a new concept. The good old people of BookTube have done this in the past, converting their TBR games into prompt generators for recommendation videos. So I think the first person that I ever saw do this was Jade from JD Ray Reads, and I'm pretty sure that Cody did one with her Wheel of TBR as well. That was like at least a year ago, I think. But my good old pal Leanne very recently made a Bookopoly TBR of her own using one of my old boards while she was pet sitting. And when I was stuck for an idea for a video, Leanne suggested that I used Bookopoly to bring you guys some recommendations today. So that is exactly what I'm going to be doing. I actually think it's been a while since I have made a recommendation video, and that is normally because I band them together by genres. And we all know, if you're familiar with this channel, I have been struggling to get some like highly rated books that I really love in the last little while. So it's taking me a long time to put together lists of like 5 fantasy romance or 5 sci-fi that I would recommend. So I thought that this would be a really cool way to let you guys know about books that I've read in, I guess, like the last year that I enjoy and would like to talk to you guys about. If you guys are unfamiliar with Bookopoly and you're kind of wondering where this came from, Bookopoly is a TBR game that I made. I think my first round was like in 2019 I think was the first year of Bookopoly, and it was a game that I played every single month to generate my TBR for 4 years or so. So we have pretty much retired Bookopoly at this point. She makes an appearance occasionally, but I will put the Bookopoly playlist in my description box if you guys would like to see where Bookopoly came from before getting to this recommendations video, which is a little bit of a resurrection for the old girl. So before we get into the recommendations on our first roll, I actually would like to talk to you guys a little bit about the sponsor of today's video, which is once again the wonderful Wild. If y'all are unfamiliar with Wild, they are a body product company that is trying to revolutionize the way that we think about toiletries and plastic waste. So they have actually sent me their limited jungle collection to show to you guys, and I am so excited. I've had a little bit of a sneak peek at this and it is absolutely stunning. So Wild are mainly known for their deodorants. The cool thing about them is that there's no plastic waste in any of the packaging or any of the products themselves. Wild products are also full of clean ingredients that are really gentle on the skin, meaning that they are great for all skin types. And in terms of their deodorant, they also do an additional range for people with especially sensitive underarm skin. To date, they have saved more than 200 tons of plastic. That is an insane amount. 200 tons of plastic from going to landfill. And as a little bonus, every time you shop with Wild, they do plant a tree. So that seems especially fitting of a segue to get into the new jungle range. Like I said, I've already had a peek. This was not what I was expecting and I love it. So not only have they sent me the brand new case, look at it. When I found out that the theme was going to be jungle, this was not what I expected, but I think it's stunning. And then not only do we have the tropical jungle refill, we also have the tropical jungle shower gel, which I'm pretty sure is a product that I have not shown on my channel before. So the refill bottles come like this, and I actually have a case here. This one is my conditioner case to show you how they work. So you have your aluminium refill case like you do with your deodorant. Just unscrew it, take out the bamboo cartridge when it's empty, and put in your new one with your pump, and that is it. You're sorted. It's as easy as that. They are of course also not only good for the environment, but they are super aesthetically pleasing, as you can see. So in terms of this new jungle scent, it is definitely not what I was expecting. I expected it to be quite fruity, quite tropical, maybe like a pineapple or a mango kind of scent, but it's actually like kind of masculine. And it has like, I'm pretty sure this has vetiver in it, as well as like some amber, which I love amber, and then some like green, some like ferns to top it off. So if anything that I've said about Wild today intrigues you, then I am very excited to let you know that they have given me a discount code to share with you guys that will get you 20% off anything from Wild. So run, do not walk to take me up on this offer because it does not last forever. And you can either scan the QR code that is on screen or click in the link at the top of my description box to get your 20% off everything from Wild using my code BeccaBooks. So I do hope you take me up on this offer, and of course a big thank you to Wild for continuing to support my channel and provide me with really amazing body products. So if y'all are new to the mysterious ways of Bookopoly, let me tell you how this is going to work. Back in ye old days, we used to do 5 rolls per month, and if I rolled a double, which is the same number displayed twice on each dice, then I would add another roll. So we're playing with those rolls again. We are starting with 5, and if I roll a double during the course of this video, we will be adding on an extra prompt and an extra recommendation. And with that in mind, let us get into our first roll. Roll number 1 is 11. And that is fantasy romance. I just realized how much fun I'm going to have editing this video in the old school Bookopoly style, but roll number 1 was a fantasy romance, one of my favorite genres and a great place to start. And I have actually, we started off the year not so well, but in the middle of the year, we have had quite a few fantasy romance hits. The most recent one for me was The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. Now this is a little bit of a unconventional one. It is fantastical, it is romantic, it skews a little bit into like a rom-com kind of style and also maybe a little bit paranormal, but I would still say in terms of the wider definition of the genre that this is still a fantasy romance. So this one is following a undertaker called Mercy and a marshal called Hart. Now Mercy's job is obviously to take care of the burial and the like death rites of dead bodies, and Hart's job is to protect the people of this world by patrolling the wild. So to simplify it, he essentially hunts zombies in a magical realm. A lot of the things in this world you have to take with a pinch of salt. There are a lot of things that kind of aren't overly explained, but when you get into the vibe and the flow of it, that doesn't matter too much, because the focus of this as well is definitely the relationship between these two. This is also a retelling of You've Got Mail, because Heart and Mercy really do not like each other. When they first met, both of them were in a little bit of a bad mood. They've rubbed each other the wrong way, and since then they absolutely despise each other. But Hart has no choice but to take these zombies, like after he's deactivated them, he has to take them to whatever undertaker is specified on the like dog tags that they wear. So sometimes he has no choice but to deliver these bodies to Mercy. Mercy is single-handedly holding up her family business. Her brother has come back from university and said he doesn't want to take over as the undertaker, which has thrown Mercy into a panic. Her sister has a secret that she doesn't want anybody else in the family to know, and her dad has recently had a heart attack, which means that he is not able to perform the services for the business that he was in the past. So Mercy is kind of juggling all of this stuff, and one day Hart, feeling kind of lonely, he's experienced a lot of loss in his life, and because of that he's a bit of a lone wolf, but he writes a letter to a friend, and the powers that be deliver this letter to Mercy, who then replies and once again signs it a friend. And throughout the course of this novel, they start to fall for each other through the letters without ever knowing that it is each other that they are communicating with, like they're communicating with the people that they hate most in all of the world. So it took me a little while to get into this. I was thrown a little bit by the world building. There are things that me personally, as somebody who likes really super developed worlds down to the nitty gritty, there are some things that I would have liked a little bit more of an explanation for, but I loved the romance in here. It did take a little while to grow on me, but I personally really love a male main character, like a love interest that has been through some stuff, and he is kind of struggling with his self-worth and his sense of confidence because of that. And something that I really enjoyed about this is that while it was romance focused, the characters have their own things to deal with really coming into themselves and standing up for themselves and regaining their confidence in different ways. Like Mercy needs to stand up to her family, and Hart needs to give the world another chance and stop thinking that everything around him is going to hurt him. And I loved seeing them work through their personal issues while also falling for each other. Rule number 2 is a 9. That is a mood read. So would this be like a wild card, I guess? So for this, I've gone for one of my only 5-star reads of the year, which is living in my mind rent-free. And that is another fantasy romance, which is The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. So this one is one that I'd heard really good things about, but I did not, because it's marketed and published as YA, I did not expect to love it to the extent that I did. And once again, this one features a male main character that has really been through it and is struggling to kind of step back into society and really live their lives in the aftermath of that. We have a theme here. So this one is a fantasy romance between a witch and a witch hunter, and our main character, our female main character, is a witch. Now, she actually didn't know that on the night when the witch hunters overthrew the witch royalty, and she had to turn in her own grandmother to save her own life, and her grandmother gave her her blessing. She wanted her to survive. But in the 2 years since then, Rune has come into her powers, and she has also dedicated herself to saving the hidden witches from persecution. So on the flip side of that, our male main character is Gideon, and he is hunting the Crimson Moth, who is a vigilante that keeps snatching witches out of his grasp as he is trying to take them into custody. This story is kind of about a witch called Seraphine that Rune is trying to find, and as she finds where Seraphine is, the witch hunters come in and take her into custody. So then Rune starts to date Gideon to try and get information out of him about where Seraphine is being held. And then on Gideon's side, he has heard some rumblings that maybe Rune is the Crimson Moth that he has been hunting all of this time. So he also aims to date her to try and figure out if she is this mysterious vigilante. Of course, it is an enemies to lovers story, and they fall for each other along the way, knowing that this relationship is doomed, because if Gideon finds out that Rune is not the Crimson Moth, his little brother is actually in love with her, so he's gonna have to step aside, and Rune knows that she will never be able to be herself with Gideon because he hates witches, and if he ever finds out what she is, it will mean the end of her life. So I love me an enemies to lovers story anyway. I also really love books that have really good banter and sexual tension, and I loved the back and forth between Gideon and Rune throughout this entire novel. Something that I really loved about this that was a little bit unique is that the love language of these characters is gifting each other clothes. And that's all I'm gonna say, because I want you to find out the finer details for yourself, but I loved that element of it. And something else that I really enjoyed about this actually is that it portrays a male victim of domestic abuse in a way that never makes them seem any less masculine or weak for having been abused. And I think that that was handled very well in here as well. Eagerly anticipating the sequel of this. Very much tied for my best book of the year this year, I think. Rule number 3 is a 5. And that is a book from a genre TBR. So this square relates to videos that I've made on my channel in the past, like top 10 sci-fi books that I want to read. So there is actually a little bit of accountability in this one, because I've interpreted this in terms of a recommendation, in that I have to recommend you a book that was featured on one of those TBRs that I've made in the past that I've actually read and enjoyed. And I've actually only made 3 in the last like year and a half, I think, across 2023 and 2024. So the one that I'm going for is not really a genre, but it's my audiobook TBR from March 2023, because I think a couple of months ago I finally, I've had this book for years, I finally listened to Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel, and I can definitely say that I do recommend the audiobook for this, and that, like I predicted in that video, the audiobook was the best route to go with this one. So this one is an adult sci-fi story about a giant robot. It starts off with a little girl who is riding her bike, and she falls in this hole in the ground into this big robot hand, and when she is an adult, she goes into science and technology, and she ends up being drafted by this mysterious guy to help to find the rest of the pieces of this robot, assemble it, figure out what it's for and where it came from, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, the technology present in the creation of this robot is so advanced that it could never have been made by humans, essentially. So the reason why this is so cool in audio is because it is told entirely in transcripts, like interviews, TV show excerpts, like logs of people in the underground labs that are created to reassemble this robot and like figure out its purpose. So the audio is also full cast, which is really cool. I would definitely recommend listening to this on audio as opposed to reading it physically, because I gave this one 4 stars, and the reason why is because I feel like it would be quite tedious to read physically. I feel like the narration really brings it to life, and there are areas in here that are quite repetitive that I feel are much better in audio because I feel like they'd really become quite tedious physically. So it is the audio narration that I loved the most about this, but I also really love the level of intrigue as people are kind of piecing together where this came from and what it's for. And I feel like Sylvain Neuvel handles the scope of the universe quite well, in that every time we get a little snippet of an answer, it opens up so many more questions. It is a first contact with alien story, but I feel like a little bit of a different one that I've read before. Not that I read a ton of first contact with alien stories, but I actually think that, because aliens don't intrigue me all that much, it's not my favorite type of sci-fi, but I feel like going through the route of the technology and the robot made it more intriguing than a regular first contact with alien story kind of is for me. Rule number 4 is a double, so we now are going to have at least 6 rolls, and that is also a 6. And that is a fantasy. Next up, we have a fantasy recommendation, and I was gonna go with one of my other 5 stars for the year, but I decided actually that I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Babble by R.F. Kuang, which is a book that I did not expect to love. I actually expected to really dislike it, and I'll be honest, I've been thinking about this one quite a bit. So this one is following a boy called Robin, who was taken as a young boy from China by this English professor who wants to train him in the art of silverworking. So the magic system in this is silverworking. It is performed through translation, but you have to have a really good grasp on the languages that you're translating to and from to be able to silverwork. So you have to be essentially fluent in both languages. So for this reason, the translation school in Oxford is the only one that is currently allowing in students of colour, so that they can use people like Robin to be able to perform the magic that fuels the British Empire. It is set in the 1800s, so it is a time of the British Empire. It is a time of colonialism. It's a historical fantasy, and the main themes of this story are colonialism, racism, particularly in institutions such as Oxford, like big educational and government institutions. And so we are following Robin throughout this book as he grows up as the ward of this professor, goes to Oxford, finds himself in a friendship group with other people of colour and also women who are not allowed into Oxford. He also starts to see the true colours of Oxford and the true colours of English society, as the people around him, like the darker skinned friends and people around him, are treated even worse than he is being treated himself. So I was nervous about this book because I thought it was going to be very pretentious, which I gotta say, like, it kind of is. I also have read from R.F. Kuang before, and I have not enjoyed what I have read. I read The Poppy War and I didn't like it. And of all the books that R.F. Kuang has written, The Poppy War would be the one that I would choose for myself if I was to try her as an author, because it's the one that sounds the most interesting. So I actually didn't have high hopes for this. I ended up really enjoying it and I gave it 4 stars. I really liked the narrative within here. I really liked following Robin's journey. I was emotional at parts throughout here, and I really liked the intricacy of the magic system and how this fits kind of seamlessly with history and historical events that we know to be true, the way that people in this country have been treated for a long time, that we know to be true now more than ever, which is really fucking sad. And in terms of this being a story, in terms of this being fiction and a narrative, I loved it. Now, what I didn't love about it on the flip side of that is that it has footnotes, and the themes, like I said, of racism and colonialism are really hammered in here. I would rather they were approached with a little bit more subtlety, because I felt like every time there was an instance of racism, all of the characters were kind of taken aside and they had a conversation about why this was racist, to really get the point across to the reader that what was happening was not okay. We also had footnotes in here where we would have moments where the colonialistic aspect was embedded in the text. Like it was a very clear kind of situation where Robin's culture was being taken from him and erased because those elements of his culture weren't useful to British society, while the bits that the professor wanted to hone were. And then there would be a footnote like kind of explaining why this is wrong. So I feel like it really went just a little bit too hard on the explaining of the book. It was almost like reading a Sparks Notes version of this book alongside the actual text, whereas I feel like it would have been more poignant if it was handled with a little bit of subtlety, if people kind of had to think about why this book was making them feel uncomfortable as opposed to just being told. But in spite of that, I still thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's one of the best books that I've read this year. Rule number 5 is a 6. And that is a sequel. Role number 5 was a sequel, and I feel like the best sequel that I've read so far this year that isn't part of like one of my regular high fantasy book clubs that I'm a part of, is Glow by Raven Kennedy. So this one is book 4 in the Pleated Prisoner series, which is once again a fantasy romance, which is a retelling of the King Midas myth. So we are following a young woman called Auron who has been gold touched by King Midas, and she is his prized possession, and he keeps her in a cage in his palace. Now she actually wants to be kept in this cage because she has faced innumerable horrors out in the world before she found Midas and fell under Midas's protection. So she would actually live in this cage and be safe with Midas, whom she's in love with, than be out in the world and potentially at risk. Everything changes for Auron when Midas wants to expand his territory, and he starts to move himself, all of his prized possessions, his household, into this new territory that he would like to conquer. And along the way, Auron and the rest of the royal saddles are attacked by raiders, and Auron has to step back into herself and kind of fight for herself for the first time in a really long time and start to conquer her fears. So I really like this series because it has a bunch of red flags starting off that sends the story in a way that I personally wasn't expecting based on the synopsis and the premise of the series going into it. While it starts off as a King Midas retelling, I feel like it really expands outside of that. It opens like a fantasy world segment. I think that the world building is very interesting but not too difficult to understand, while still having quite a bit of depth and complexity. Like a lot of indie fantasy romance, which this was before it was traditionally published later on in the series, it has a lot of very slow moments, a lot of character development, and I love me a slow story, but every book ends with this like super impactful, like twisty, shocking ending that is a cliffhanger leading into the next book. So I've just got my hands on Gold from my library. The reason why I don't have a copy of this is because I'm waiting for editions that match mine. I want the second half of the series in the Fairy Loot editions because it's the only way at this point that I'm gonna have a matching set without rebuying everything that I already own. So I've just got my hands on Gold from the library, and I'm very excited to read it because the last book in this series is out this year as well. So I'm thinking I'm just gonna try and like read right through and finish before the end of the year. And our final roll, hopefully, roll number 6, is 5. Okay, this is a community shelf card, and it is a friend rec, so I guess a book that I enjoyed that a friend recommended to me. So our final roll was a card, and it was a friend recommendation. So a book that I've enjoyed recently that was recommended to me by a friend, and I actually only read because it was recommended to me by a friend, was Vanished. I have it. The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. So this one was recommended to me by Aaron, and there is a story behind it that I've actually told recently in, I think, episode 6 of Shelve It or Scrap It, which I'll link if you all want to check it out. If you're enjoying Bookopoly as well, I have done a Bookopoly episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, which I will also link. But Aaron recommended this one to me because I am a big fan of the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers, and there are some similarities here but also some pretty big differences. So The Vanished Birds is following 3 characters. One is the captain of a ship that spends all of her time traveling between different areas of space, and the rest of the universe grows old while she doesn't, because the time it takes her to travel between is shorter than the time that is passing in the places that she is traveling between. We are also following a boy who crashes onto this planet, which is called a resource world, and he has no idea how he got there, but the ship that the captain is on comes to this resource world to collect the resources and ends up taking kind of the boy with her. And the other character we're following is the woman who created and designed the space stations that the population of Earth fled to after or during like the end of the world when the planet was dying. So she has found a way to preserve her life to a point where she's now pretty much 1,000 years old. So the actual plot of this is that the woman that designed the space stations believes that this boy holds the secret to advancing technology. So she asked the captain to take him on this 15-year journey with a crew of very trusted people outside of controlled space so that they can't surveil him up until a point where he matures and his power matures, where they want her to bring him back so that they can see if they truly can develop this technology. It is a story that focuses more on the themes than it does necessarily the plot, that focuses more on the relationships between the characters and the found family element that we have along the way. It also focuses on colonialism a little bit. There are themes of abuse quite frequent through here as well, and it very much has the tone of the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers pretty much for the longest time. But where it differs, where it's very different from the Wayfarer series, is that this goes in a much more extreme kind of direction with the plot twists than the Wayfarer series ever does. The Wayfarer series is quite introspective, it's almost cozy in a way. There's not a lot of plot, but there's a lot of vibes, and this has a lot more plot twists. The stakes are a lot higher. There is a lot more kind of impactful plot events going on through here that don't necessarily make it turn out okay. Like I said, the stakes are high. It deals with the topics of things like abuse and torture a lot more graphically than like the Wayfarer series ever has. But I really enjoyed the exploration of themes in here. I really enjoyed the writing style and the thoughtful, slow pacing as the story unraveled. I did give this one 4 stars because I would have liked to be a little bit more attached to the characters, but I very much enjoyed my time reading this one. So there we have 6 recommendations based on prompts generated by the Bookopoly board. I hope you enjoyed this little resurrection of Bookopoly for this recommendation video. If you have and you'd like to see more like this in the future, then please let me know down in the comments, and I can be sure every few months or so to bring you maybe a couple of times a year because I don't know how many books I have to recommend. But yeah, maybe we could do this again in the future if you enjoyed it. If you would like to leave me a little comment down below but you don't feel like you have anything to say, leave me a bird emoji down there just to let me know that you stopped by. Once again, a big thank you to Wild for sponsoring this video, and please don't forget that if you would like to get 20% off the entire Wild range, then for a limited time you can head to the link down in my description box, enter the code BECCABUMXX at checkout and get yourself a little bit of a discount. Also down in my description box you are going to find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Patreon if you would like to join me on any of those. And aside from that, that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.